And that brings us to book 6, The Twilight, not Twilight, The Twilight. Paul has been teaching Suze how to shift realities, which is kind of what she's been doing anyway when she's like forcing people to cross over who don't want to, and she's like, it's what you need! Kicks them in the butt. The mechanics of this shifting thing are very loose, but Paul figures out that you can time shift, which is basically time travel. But to do that, you have to hold an object that was owned by a specific person and stand in the same spot as that specific person that they would have stood holding that object, and then think really hard, and then you'll go back in time to that same place holding that same object as that person once did. Yeah. Anyway, that's the rules according to Paul's grandpa. Your whole body goes back in time with you. Suze finds out about this, and she considers going back in time to, like, save her dad because he died from a fatal jog? Weirdest explanation for death I've ever heard. It's never said, like, oh, he was in a car accident, like someone hit him, he had a heart attack while running. It just says he died from a fatal jog. But then Suze realizes that if she did that, her mom would never have met her stepdad, who the two of them are really in love now. Suze is finally getting along with her stepbrothers. She really does love, like, the youngest one. And he ends up figuring out that she's a mediator and what that means, and it's super cute. So Suze is like, oh, well, now we know about this, cool. I don't have any reason to time travel. And then Paul's like, of course, I do. Stupid Paul thinks that the answer to all his problems is going back in time and saving Jesse from being murdered, and then that means Suze will like him in the current timeline. And of course, the priest, Father Dominic, who is Suze's mentor, and he does actually help her. He does have some good points, but this one I can't agree with. He thinks Paul's being noble for wanting to go back in time and save Jesse. Priest? Paul's grandpa, who figured out how to time travel, and Suze's dad thinks it is a good idea for Paul to go back in time, and I'm so confused, because what about all the times that Jesse saved her butt as a ghost when Suze didn't want to admit that she needed help and could have died, and then he swooped in and was like, hey, I got your back. I'm your backup. I know you got this. You're doing great, but I'm here if you need me. The amount of times he has done that and been there for her. What is that going to do for the timeline? How is that going to screw up what's already happened? And Jesse is the only one besides Suze that thinks Paul going back in time to save his own life is a bad idea. Because what could happen? It could put Suze in danger. And Jesse actually tells her, he's like, I know you could beat him. I know you could stop Paul from going back in time. But I am really worried about what could happen to you if you accidentally time travel with him. We don't understand this science. It literally makes no sense. But Paul ends up grabbing a belt buckle, going to the church, and goes back in time. So what does Suze do? She also goes back in time. And she gets kicked out of her own house in 1850 because of what she's wearing. Classic, oh, we traveled back in time. Oh, we don't look like we fit in this period. We gotta get a disguise real quick. He finds Suze there, ends up tying her up in the barn, and then he goes off to find Diego. But luckily for Suze, Jesse gets there, finds this random girl tied up in the top of his barn, and he's like, what the hell, man? Like, are you okay? She's like, oh, I can't let him die. He needs to live. He deserves to have a life. He doesn't deserve to be stuck in my bedroom for 200 years. But what happens is Suze spills the beans. She tells him he's from the future. He doesn't believe her at first, but then she's like, I know you. I know you don't really want to be a rancher. You want to be a doctor. But your circumstances don't allow it because you got to provide for your family, and that gets him to believe that she's from the future. So what does Jesse do? He ends up killing Diego on his own because he's like, you murdered me? I'm gonna murder you, bitch. And the causes of fire Because Paul's also there and he's stupid again. But Paul shifts back to the current, like, timeline where he's from, leaving Suze back in the 1850s in a barn that's on fire. Again, why does he think she should be in love with him? He gives her nothing. Suze and Jesse grab onto each other, jump out of the barn as it, like, erupts into flames. And at the very last second before they hit the ground and, like, break their bodies, she shifts back into the time that she's from. And what happens? Oh, looks like she accidentally brought back Jesse's alive body. What does that mean? Ghost Jesse appears, and when he touches his body, because he's like, what the heck, is that me? Ghost Jesse gets zooped back into his alive body, just like if he was astral projecting himself. But it's like the Jessies from two different timelines go whoop into one. This means Jesse is alive. And Suze doesn't have to date a ghost because he's alive. It ends with Suze and Jesse going to a school dance together because they can, and Paul's there. But he apologizes to Suze and admits he was wrong about everything, which, like, duh. But also, Suze gets to say goodbye to her dad for the last time because he can cross over now because she's happy, because she has Jesse. And at the very last second, Jesse, like, hey, I saw you talking to your dad, like, I'm proud of you. How'd that go? Like, that must have been really sad. And Suze is like, Jesse, you could see my dad who's a ghost? That means you're not just a human, you're not just alive now, you're also a mediator.